Right. So we're going to be doing that again. The only difference is we're looking at the difference between simple interest versus what we call simple discount. Okay, so simple interest versus simple discount. There's one major difference, and that's it. Okay, so this chapter should be very, very easy for you. You're going to be using the same things you did in the last chapter, except we're looking at a different type of loan, where what they do is they take out the interest up front. So the interest is deducted. I'll use the expression up front, which means before you walk out the door with your, when you go to get a loan, you walk out with a check, right? So over here, the interest is not deducted up front. It is not. So that's what we just finished doing in the last chapter. So, for instance, if you borrow, let's keep it simple. If you borrow $1,000, and let's say you have 10% interest. I'm trying to just keep this very simple with the numbers. So here's your interest rate, right? R. Here's your principal, which you're borrowing. Under simple interest method, which we did in chapter 10, what would happen is you would walk out of the door. Here's a new word for you. With proceeds of $1,000. Okay? Because you're borrowing $1,000. Now, over the time period of the loan, the time is not important right now. Okay, don't worry about that. We can say it's for a year, 2 years, whatever. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is, you borrow $1,000, you walk out with $1,000. Here, and you will pay the interest back over time, right? Here, you borrow $1,000. Proceeds, which means how much you walk out with in your hand, would be what? Not 1,000. 900. How come? Because we take the 10% off the top. Take it out up front. If you understand that, then this should be a breeze. Another simple chapter. Remember, some of these will be more challenging for you, so enjoy the easy ones. Okay. As always, we give some background on the subject. And of course, here is a promissory note. Now, you should be familiar with this if you have student loans, with this term. You should also be familiar with it if you've borrowed money of any kind. Because doesn't it usually say promissory note? Usually. Or maybe loan documents, something similar. So it's a loan. Okay? And they don't all look just like this, but this gives us all most of the pieces that we need. And they even lettered them. You can see down here in the key, they've given a letter to each part where you can match it up. It's matching. So the amount, or the face value, you can think of it as the principal. The face value is $10,000. This is how much is being borrowed. Okay? And let's go through it part by part. B is the time. B is right here. It's being borrowed for 60 days. So from October 2nd, which is the date of borrowing, October 2nd, we go 60 days into the future, and it'll be due when? December 1st. The maturity date, December 1st. Okay, so moving right along. The payee, Part D. That is the person who is receiving the money, right? That is the person who is signing for the money, who owes, the borrower. This is the amount written in words. Looks like a check, doesn't it? Supposedly they have to cash it at Able National Bank or at their own bank. So either at the bank of the person who wrote it or the maker. This is the corporation who is loaning the money, the lender, okay? Or at the bank of the borrower, one of the two. Okay, the rate, E, it's 9%. A rate is always expressed in terms of what percentage, right? Okay, we discussed everything here. Do you have any question about the parts of a promissory note? Pretty simple. So if there's anybody here who has never borrowed any money, some of this might sound new. But again, if you have student loans, I'm sure you've seen this. Doesn't it say that on there? It says it on mine. On the many documents that I have. So we have what we call a simple discount note, and that is what I was trying to show you over here. Now that's this chapter, obviously. Last chapter we did simple interest notes. Simple interest. Again, what is the only difference? The word discount, and which means what? They deduct the interest up front, and you walk out with less. Very simple. Okay, and all of that explained here. It's all explained here. Let's see if there's anything. There is a couple of things, or there are a couple of things I have to point out. You know what maturity value is. You know what that is already. Okay, the bank discount rate. What does that mean? Let's shorten it down to one word. How can we shorten that down to one word? Rate.
Right.
It's R.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that, it's R in the formula. Okay? So, the bank discount. The bank discount, what is that going to be?
The
Interest. I. These are good things to know because they use this language in the problems. The proceeds, the amount that they leave with, you know, when they walk out of the door from the lending institution. Now notice, it is not always the same as the maturity value. So proceeds does not always equal maturity value. Remember that. Now, simple discounting, from what I understand, from a little bit of research I've done on it, it is not used in some states, or maybe in several states, because of what reason? Because, remember this, because the effective rate of interest, have we talked about effective rate in here yet?
No.
I don't think so. We'll start doing that now then. The effective rate of interest represents the real rate of interest. In other words, if you pay 10% here on this $1,000, over here, you're going to pay 10 point something percent. What I want you to remember is that under simple discounting method, the interest rate is always higher. Not a lot higher. If you have 10%, maybe 10.5%. Depends upon the time, how long it's taken out for. Okay? Remember that though, your interest rate is always going to be higher under this method. So that 10% would be like 10.5 or something similar. Ready for the next one? Here's an example of a problem. We have Terrence, who's borrowing. Borrow is your key word, right? $10,000. What do you notice about this formula? Principal times rate times time. Now, who can tell me again, why is 360 there?
How many days in the year is ordinary?
Ordinary interest. Now, I know someone, was it you last class period that had that question for me? Or did somebody? It was you. I didn't forget about it. I thought about it 3 or 4 times. I never did go look for an answer. I emailed the other, there's 2 of us that teach this course full-time in our department, and I emailed her. I'm waiting to see what she says. But I'm curious too. Why in the chart do we use 365? Remember last time? We use 365 whenever we figure out how many days. But then it's based on 360 days, yeah. So I never thought of that. But let me see what she says. Let's see if she has an answer. Okay, I haven't forgotten. So that means it's ordinary interest. They don't tell you that here in the problem. Now, if you have a problem, a quiz problem, and they don't mention it, you're going to assume that you use 360 as the bottom number. Remember that for time.
If it doesn't show?
If it doesn't say use ordinary interest, yeah. Use 360.
Use it either way.
Huh?
It doesn't say it says ordinary.
Unless it says 360.
Unless it tells you exact, which is usually uncommon. Okay? Now it says the bank, it's for 90 days. That's what? We know days is time. So there's T, 90 over 360. What else could you use in that example, just like in the last 2 weeks?
9 over 12.
There's many things you can use. 1/4 or what else? What?
0.25.
1/4 or 0.25. If you can turn this into a decimal without a repeating, without any remainder on it, or it's just, because that's exactly equivalent to 0.25, then I would recommend using the decimals. It will just make it easier for you. One less calculation. Okay? So, the bank discount the note at 10%. Percent sign, that's your rate. That's R. P times R times T gives you what? The interest. Now, do they call it interest here? In this chapter, we call it the bank discount. It's the same thing as I. Exactly. Now, when you see the words bank discount rate, if you see bank discount rate, that is your rate. Same thing as rate. Okay? Now, down here at the bottom, they want you to figure out the proceeds. So in the problems, they might ask you for the interest first, and then you have to also figure out the proceeds in some of these. So 10,000 was the principal, right? We subtract what from it? The interest or the bank discount, same thing. And this is what we walk out of the door with. We don't walk out with 10,000 like we would have in this chapter. That's the only difference. Now you will have to figure out effective rate. That's coming up. So this is not the only type of problem. There's also one on Treasury bills. So it's not going to be that easy. I mean, it's still going to be easy, but it's, you have a little variety here. It's not just this. Okay, any questions so far?
Is it usual when if you were to take out a loan that the interest would be higher if the loan is higher, or is it
If the loan, when you said
like steady market rate interest?
Repeat that again, because when you
So like let's say they take out $10,000
Okay.
and that's kind of a high end loan. So the interest is 10%, but let's say it was lower with the interest go lower. You know what I mean?
Are you talking
Is
about
that
like?
like
Are you talking about like market rates of interest or
I
something?
guess.
I think that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, the interest rate you receive depends on several factors. The market rate of interest is like the average rate of interest that most borrowers would get. That's how I look at it. But they look at your credit record. They look at your history, your credit history, everything, and that could raise your interest rate or lower it below what the average person is getting.
You took the income ratio, whether you even qualify for the loan.
Yeah, they'll look at your income. They'll look at your income to see if you can even afford to pay the loan. So just stay away from loans. Just stay away from them. You don't have to worry about it. Don't borrow anything.
Then you want to verify your
Then you won't have
income.
anything. Can't buy a house. Can't buy a car. Unless
Then you
pay
got to
cash.
show your income.
That's your Dave Ramsey.
These days it's ridiculous. They want W-2s, they want pay stubs, last couple of months, last 2 years W-2s. I mean, I just went through the process of buying a house. It's just
No, if you need
ridiculous.
some help, let me know.
Oh, I don't need any help. I know it backwards and forwards.
Ditto.
Okay, so we're done with this. Okay, this is summarizing a lot of the things I just said. Don't let this confuse you, all right? There's just a few things I want to point out here. We don't have to read through all of it, but let's see what's different. Couple things I want to point out.
Number 6, the effective rate.
Yes, that's probably what I was getting up to. Notice right here. Now the borrower, number 5, receives $14,000 when they borrow $14,000. Under Chapter 11 or new chapter, they would receive what? 13,813.
Because they take the interest.
Because they're
out first.
taking out that interest, this 1,880.67 off the top. We talked about this already. Now notice something here. This is worth noticing. The interest rate under Chapter 10 is 8% in this example. Notice how it's a little bit higher in this one. We call that the effective rate of interest. Effective rate, which is also thought of as the real rate, is what you're actually paying. So what happened is, in several states, they said, well, this is a bit deceiving to borrowers, so we're going to make this, you can't do this. The banks can't do it. Lending institutions can't do it. In places where it's still legal, they probably still do it, I'm not sure about this state. But you're going to pay more interest under Chapter 11 method. Okay? And that's really all I wanted to show. And they even mentioned that right here, legislation back in 1969. It explains right here, why they don't use it as much. But they want us to learn about it, so.
I said the way our economy is nowadays, I think we need to rewrite some of the rules for banks.
I can go on and on about that, especially credit, the credit bureaus.
Yes.
That needs to be totally, we'll talk about that one day. That needs to be totally redone. We'll spend a whole hour just on that.
Yeah, that's like on the
We'll see that related.
it needs to be changed. People say your car value and all that, that should be changed.
A lot of things are not fair, my credit is fine. But what the reason I'm telling you that is because I still think it's very unfair. It is a huge game, that's all it is. And if you know how to play it, you can win. If you don't, you're going to always pay higher interest. You're going to get higher interest rates. You're going to get turned down for things. There's so many simple little things you can do to get that score.
Are we going to
I
talk
know.
about
Is
the?
that what Reed Dave Ramsey?
What's that?
Reed Dave Ramsey.
Oh, Dave Ramsey?
Yeah.
And that's the, I know who he is.
Financial guru.
Okay. I haven't heard the name in a while. But yes, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I know the name.
No, he does the radio thing.
Huh?
He does the radio thing.
Oh, I listen to the radio. I have music on my radio.
I just had. Are we going to talk about fixed APR and that one that goes up and up and up, or no?
I don't think so.
I don't. I'm never.
Talking about variable rates.
Yeah.
No,
My
we're
brother
not.
did that. And he was
Yeah, they can
I was
change
like,
your rate. Just like credit cards, you can change your rate if you don't pay on time. So,
Compounding
it's in the
interest.
contract.
Mhm.
Okay, so getting back to our focus. So again, here is a comparison between Chapter 10 and Chapter 11. And, I can say the same thing over and over till I'm blue in the face, but you've been listening, right? So you see what's going on here. In the end, no?
No, because it looks like the same exact up top, but yet different interests. I mean, the point.
The only thing that's different is this is the bottom, the
Oh,
proceeds. That's what's going to be different always.
well, why is it 186,671 and 187?
Oh, that's probably a mistake.
That was a
That's
mistake.
I think it's a mistake. Yeah, I didn't even notice that.
Can you redo that?
Don't let that bother you.
Mm-mm.
You're going to see more mistakes in these PowerPoints. So, What's that?
Subtract.
What is it most beneficial to use either of them? Well, this is more beneficial for the bank because you're going to pay more interest.
Yeah.
The effective interest rate is always higher, so it's less beneficial for you. This would be more beneficial for you and less beneficial for the bank. No. The effective rate of interest, like I said, is always higher using this method. It's always a little bit higher, maybe not a lot. Okay, here it is, effective rate of interest. So you can have this in your problem. Let's take a look. They define it right here. The effective rate for a simple discount note is higher. It's always higher than the stated rate. Now the stated rate is simply the rate that's stated in the problem, up in the words. Right? Like this would be the stated rate, in the example I gave you over here.
I understand the difference and everything, and so you're telling me they took out 186.67, and that's at 8.11%, or they're going to charge 8.11 cents after they already took the interest out?
Correct. Second one.
So they're double interesting you then.
Yeah. Bottom line is, again, and I'll keep saying it, in the end, you're paying this percent interest, and you're paying this percent.
Does it make sense? Because you can't pay that one off early. You can on this one, it will be for your
Correct.
principal only. It'll hurt you on this one, it wouldn't make sense.
Right. This is the world we live in. So, since the bank calculated the rate on the face of the note and not on what Terrence received. So, look at the problem here. Now, pay close attention. Look at step 1 and compare. It's just a comparison. What are we solving for there? R, not for I. So you know how to do this by now, right? If you did the last quiz, you had to do some of this. And you have to take this equation and solve it for R. So you divide both sides by principal times time. You would divide both sides by PT. And that's what you get here. Now here we always call it the principal. Here they call it the proceeds. So I want you to think of this like the principal. Think of it because it fits in the formula the same way. You know what I'm saying? Question.
If it's virtually the same thing, why don't they just use principal and keep it consistent?
Because
Because it's a guy thing. They
No.
gotta use more
no,
words.
because proceed. There is a reason. Proceeds. How do we define that? That is the amount of money you walk out of the bank with after you're done signing the papers.
Okay.
So they don't use principal because of the difference. What's happening is now we're referring to a situation where you're actually getting less when you walk out of the bank.
Okay.
So proceeds is how much you're actually getting.
Okay.
That's why they're using this.
Well, it's just the way it sounds and the fact that the actual definition of proceeds is not that.
Don't let that bother you.
That's what gets me.
Ready for another one? Do you see this? You see that I didn't go all the way through it, but you just plug everything in.
And then you just subtract that from the 14,000 and then do your profit.
In other words, if you work this side, you're going to come out with R equals 8% exactly. If you work it over here, notice the only thing different is what?
The amount.
The interest
Was
has been
subtracted.
subtracted from the 14,000 on this side. That's how you get 13,813. That's the only thing that's different, and that's why this answer is a little bit higher. So in your problems, you would figure out interest, I, and then, you would subtract it. You would subtract it from the amount the person wants to borrow. And that would be the proceeds. Ready for another one? Okay, something a little bit different. Treasury bills. Anybody have any idea what these are? We're not talking about loans.
They like bonds.
It's the opposite. It's similar to a bond. It's more short term. It's more of a short-term investment. We can buy these. We can buy Treasury bills. We can buy Treasury bonds.
And then-
Treasury, huh?
And then
They owe us. The
Yeah,
government's
they-
borrowing money from us.
what's the word? I just had it and then lost it. It, increases in value over time. Like a bond. I mean, you buy a bond at $25, certain amount of time passes by, that bond is worth 50. Ultimately.
As far as I know, I haven't. If you buy a bond, it's the terms are set. In other words, if you're guaranteed a certain amount of interest, they're going to pay you back your principal, whatever you loan the government, plus some interest, and that's really how it works. So they're investments, okay? Treasury bills are more short-term than bonds. They're usually in denominations of 13 weeks, which we can also say is the same thing as 93 days, because 7 times 13, or 91, 7 times 13 is 91, okay? In the problems, when we go over the quiz, next time we come, you have to be very careful, because I know, I remember in the Treasury bill problems, there's a couple little quirky things. And when we get there on Wednesday, we're not going to question it to death. Just make sure that you input your answer the way that I tell you to. This will make more sense on Wednesday, okay? You'll
Well,
see.
there's 52 weeks in a year and 13 weeks, so that's how you get the 52.
Yeah, but you'll see.
Okay.
There's at least one problem, maybe two. They say it a certain way in the words, but then they want you to work it
Different.
slightly different.
Okay.
You'll see. So, for example, if you buy a $10,000 13-week Treasury bill, so you're paying $10,000 for it. That is think about it as your principal. Now, you're not borrowing.
No.
You're not borrowing. This is the amount you're investing. You are loaning. You're loaning the government $10,000. But I'm just trying to make it simple. When you're using the formulas to do this, you would plug this in where P usually goes. Except now, you're loaning them the money. Okay? Because you're investing in the government. Now, they're going to pay you 8%. There's R. And they want to know how much will you pay and what is the effective rate. So we know it's for 13 weeks. There's your time word, 13. So there's T. Now, why do we use 52? Because there's 52
weeks
total
in a year.
weeks in a year. So if it said months, then we'd have 12 at the bottom, right? It says weeks. So 13 over 52, who could tell me what that could be reduced to?
0.25.
Exactly, good, 0.25. Because this reduces down to 1/4 evenly, which is 0.25 again. But, like I said, when we go over the problems, if I tell you to put the answer in a certain way, put it in a certain way, okay? So the interest here is $200. The interest that you will earn is $200, okay? Now what they're doing, the cost, this is what's happening. We're taking the amount that you're loaning to the government. We're subtracting the interest, and this is what you're paying. This is what you're paying, your cost for that Treasury bill. Follow me along to the end before you ask any questions. Now to figure out the effective rate, do you notice what's going on here? On top we have I, interest, I. This is what? It would normally be there.
Principal.
Principal,
And time.
which we got here. And then this is time. Interest, principal, time.
And then you get your rate.
And then you get your effective rate. Now what do you notice? 8.16 is higher than 8%. Why is that? Because if you took out the $200, which made this $9,800, if this was $10,000, this would come out to exactly 8.0. So you pay them $9,800, and over time they will pay you back $10,000. That's basically how it works. Over the 13 weeks.
That's why during World War II, they wanted you to buy bonds.
Oh,
They needed
yeah.
the money.
Oh, big time. During wartime, they often sell bonds and bills. They really push that because the government wants money to manufacture defense goods. bombs,
Bombs.
Apache helicopters, and stuff like that, and grenades. Those fun things. So, do you see how to get effective rates? Do you see the steps? So remember, we're going to go over this again on the quiz review. Wow, that's it. That last part, let me sleep on it for a night or two if I can even sleep. I haven't decided if I want to give you that yet or not. Or those last the last two slides really. Those other 3 or 4 slides after that was with just some problem solutions that come from the book. Why they're on here, I don't know. But there was like 2 more slides really, actually, and it involves basically what it is having what we call a discount period. If you need to know it, I'll explain it to you on Wednesday. Okay, let me take another look at it. I don't think I normally give that to them, to the other classes in the past. So I think you have what you need. But let me think about that. The quiz isn't open till Wednesday, so it's not like you're losing time anyway. You have any questions at all? I could go over the quiz. I have enough time.
What are we doing Wednesday then?
Wednesday, that would mean the quiz would open tonight, and then Wednesday I'd probably give maybe a review for the exam.
Or-
Huh? I think it's going to happen that way anyway, though. Because you'll be starting a new chapter when you're taking the test, or you'll still be on the old. So either way. No, not ready?
Will we have both?
I say take an early day.
What do you mean by that?
Early days
It
always
means
good.
let us out early.
Huh? What's that?
Not go over the quiz and wait until Wednesday, because our quiz for chapter 10 is not finished yet. It's not
Or 11?
closed yet. No, for 10.
Oh, 10's not finished. You're right. That's a good point.
Yes, then we would have chapter 10 and 11.
This is how I usually do it. I just hate to have so much extra time. If I feel like somebody's out there waiting, watching to see if I let my class out early.
Just tell them you're an effective teacher.
Huh?
You're an effective teacher.
Or efficient.
There you go. That too.
Both.
You gonna go over the quiz or?
Probably not. I'm just burning a few minutes there.
So, sir, are we gonna have, the homework quiz and the exam at the same time? Or are we just gonna have one?